Cinema is a particularly intermedial medium. Cinema, as Agnes Pato puts it, is, quote, a medium in continuous change and interchange that can incorporate forms of all other media and can initiate fusions and dialogues between the distinct arts, end quote. In other words, you can find examples of films that borrow from, adapt, or engage with almost any other medium. The relationship between cinema and painting is a particularly interesting one, because while both media are fundamentally visual, painting is a static medium of space, while film, like literature and theater, is a dynamic medium of time. In his book, What is Cinema?, André Bazin puts it this way: the sequence of a film gives it a unity in time that is horizontal and, so to speak, geographical, whereas time in a painting, so far as the notion applies, develops geologically and in depth. This combination of media allows filmmakers to explore visual and narrative effects in their work that might not be possible with so-called pure media. Today, I will discuss how film can reference painting in its visual style, as well as narrative and editorial choices, with specific reference to two case studies: Jean-Pierre Genet's Le fabuleux destin d'Amélie Poulain, known in English simply as Amélie, and Tom Moore and Nora Twomey's animated feature The Secret of Kells. I argue that both of these films are extended adaptations, or palimpsests, of two works of visual art. These are Renoir's impressionist painting Le Déjeuner des Canotiers, or Luncheon of the Boating Party in English, and The Book of Kells, an Irish medieval illuminated manuscript. In analyzing these films, we will see how cinema, in adapting works of painting, can establish a sense of cultural or national identity within the world of the film. We will also see how these films, in looking back to historical works of painting for inspiration, bring the past into the present through remediation and adaptation to create an ongoing dialogue with history, as well as question the established hierarchy of the arts by putting painting, often considered the paragon of high art, in conversation with the more lowbrow, popular medium of film. Amélie is a 2001 film by the French director Jean-Pierre Genet, who is known for films that combine the mundane and the fantastical. Amélie is no exception. The film follows a girl named Amélie Poulain through her childhood and into her young adulthood, where she works in a cafe, buys groceries, and has various encounters with neighbors in her building in Montmartre. Yet this quotidian narrative is filled with whimsy and fantastical adventures, in particular when Amélie discovers a child's tin box of treasures behind a loose tile in her bathroom. Her search for its owner brings her into contact with Monsieur Dufayel, whose main occupation is endlessly copying Renoir's Luncheon of the Boating Party. He tells her that he can never quite get one of the figures right. This is the girl near the middle of the painting, who is drinking from a water glass. This painting serves as a central visual and narrative touchstone for the film, as we will see later. The painting is also one of many elements of French culture, art, and history that the film references. We will also look more at the cultural and national aspects and effects of Amélie later on. The Secret of Kells takes its inspiration not from a single painting, but from the Book of Kells, an Irish illuminated manuscript that dates to sometime in the 8th or early 9th century of the Common Era. It is an insular gospel book, created by and for monks. The film, produced by Irish animation studio Cartoon Saloon in 2009, adapts the true history of the book into a fictionalized but plausible story, while also adapting the book's illuminations into its highly stylized approach to 2D animation. The film both is about, and in a way is, the Book of Kells. We will look more at how the film both references and remediates the book later. The Secret of Kells incorporates many elements of Irish history, culture, and craft beyond the Book of Kells. Let's take a closer look at Luncheon of the Boating Party so we can see how Amélie references it. Sandra Forty describes Renoir as, above all, a painter of people, especially young women and rosy-cheeked children. His style is instantly recognizable with its free-flowing brushstrokes, creating brightly colored, romanticized pictures. His outdoor scenes sparkle with dappled sunlight. You, the viewer, can almost feel the warmth of the sun and the light, refreshing breeze he portrays. His mature impressionist style comprised brilliant, pure, complementary colors rendered in compositions using a broken brushwork technique. Many of Renoir's paintings use the complementary colors of pale blue and peach or orange for dappled light for portraiture, but he was also especially fond of painting with green with red accents. This is the primary color script of Amélie as well, notably in her flat, which is decorated mainly in red and green, the cafe where she works, and the metro. The scene where she skips stones over the Seine is particularly reminiscent of Renoir's leafy, dappled light paintings. Amélie is often wearing red and occasionally green as well, and the lighting design accentuates the red and green hues and tints the world around her, so that nearly every scene follows this color scheme. The colored lighting and digital improvement of Montmartre to remove anything unseemly, like graffiti, which might disrupt Amélie's designed world, gives the film a painterly, slightly fantastical feel, like we have stepped into a beautiful painted world, Mary Poppins style. This visual enhancement of Paris in the film is similar to Renoir's careful compositions of Parisian society life and charming country trips, which ignored any aspects of the real world that didn't appeal to him. The result, like in Amélie, is a beautiful, slightly naive portrait of a romanticized world that ignores many of the realities of the world it depicts, but is nevertheless enduringly appealing to a wide audience. Amélie's references to Renoir's paintings go beyond these visual aspects. The film can be seen as something of an adaptation of the painting, telling the modernized story of one of its figures. Luncheon of the Boating Party features a number of people from Renoir's circle, including socialites and models. The young woman with the dog in the bottom left corner is Aline Charigot, one of his favorite models who would later become his wife. The composition of the painting draws the eye toward her, as does her animated pose. But in Amélie, the painter Monsieur Dufayel's interest is on the background figure who occupies the near center of the composition, La Fille au Verre d'Eau, or the girl with the water glass. This figure bears a resemblance to Amélie with her dark, fringed hair and her pale skin. She even wears a red flower on her hat. The character of Amélie is actually the perfect Renoir archetype, according to Natalia Brodskaya. There are no allusions to her social status, character, or mood, only the delight of porcelain skin, slightly painted lips, and an elegant dress, only the transient charm of the Parisienne. Like Amélie, Renoir lived in Montmartre for nearly all of his time in Paris, so if she had been wandering dreamily about in the 1870s instead of 2001, she very well might have been one of his models. There are several narrative parallels between the painting and the film. While Renoir's Parisienne sips water in a restaurant, Amélie works in a cafe, surrounded by people but not engaging with any of them, both at work and in her personal life. Amélie, like her painted counterpart, is a background figure in the lives of others, but the central figure of the film. She is carefully observant, watching the ways in which others go about their lives, and involves herself in them without them realizing. This connection between Amélie and Renoir's lunching girl creates something of a mise en abîme within the painting, going beyond mere reference to create a dialogue between the two art forms. Angela Della Valle argues that film, because it blurs the distinction between high art and popular culture, has the tendency to challenge not just painting in isolation, but rather the whole system of the arts, as well as its hierarchies, alliances, and hostilities. Amélie does engage in this challenging of artistic hierarchies, but because its relationship with Renoir's painting is symbiotic, in that it draws visually and culturally from the painting but also provides a narrative for the static scene, Amélie suggests that the most fruitful relationship between different media might be that of collaboration. This is especially true when it comes to the mixing of static and dynamic media, and of high and low culture, because the combination of such different art forms allows for new experiences and experimentation that might not otherwise be possible. In incorporating and adapting Luncheon of the Boating Party into film, Amélie remediates Renoir's painting. Wolter and Grusin define remediation as the ways in which, quote, a medium refashions its predecessors and other contemporary media, unquote, adding that remediation offers us a means of interpreting the work of earlier media as well. In Amélie, remediation has stylistic, narrative, and cultural implications for the film, but it also encourages a new or enhanced interpretation of Renoir's painting. The Secret of Kells is also an act of remediation and adaptation. Elisabeth Buchelt writes that it is not an adaptation in the conventional sense. That is, there is no single original or base prose work from which it draws its inspiration. Instead, The Secret of Kells is an adaptation of an aesthetic and an imagined historical epoch, as strained through a contemporary, multicultural collaborative group of artists, writers, and musicians. The result is an impressionistic, layered experience of medieval Ireland and the monastic scribal tradition that is neither entirely fictional nor entirely factual, but is an entirely true insight to a culture over 1,500 years removed, and the ways in which that culture has been appropriated by the modern era. Lynn Ramey also discusses the film's remediation and adaptation of the Book of Kells, writing that The Secret of Kells is about the manuscript, but it also includes a fictitious, though not entirely implausible, story of its production, so that while the film is remediating the Book of Kells, it is also presenting a new story, that of the young illuminator Brandon, and a fantastical explanation of how the Book of Kells came into being. The Secret of Kells is remediating the Book of Kells while also adapting the story of its creation. Like many medieval illuminated manuscripts, the film is itself a palimpsest, inscribing the story of Brandon over the story of the book itself and layering modern visual media onto medieval techniques. Bouchelt writes that the film looks to restore a more holistic conception of the book by providing the public with a space in which to experience visuals and narrative that interact in a complexly layered way that mirrors the experience of the medieval audiences of the Book of Kells. Through these palimpsestic acts of remediation and adaptation, the film opens up a dialogue between ancient and modern media and artistic form. Like in Amélie, The Secret of Kells is not remediating a historical work simply to, quote, critique and refashion it, unquote, to again borrow from Bolter and Grusin's terminology, but rather to engage collaboratively with art history to make a medieval work relevant and interesting to a modern audience with the help of modern technology. I'll explore the cultural and creative aspects of this collaborative kind of remediation in both films more in a bit, but first I want to analyze the ways in which The Secret of Kells visually and narratively borrows from and adapts the Book of Kells onto the screen. The Book of Kells includes both text and illustration, but these two media are not separate from one another. One example of this is in the famous Kai Rho page, which features Christ's initials in Greek in heavily ornamented illumination, as well as in the incipits to John and Mark, where text appears near the bottom of the page amidst the illustration. Another example is the illuminated capital letters that are one of the hallmarks of medieval manuscripts. These are a bit less dramatic, but the detail is still extremely fine and beautifully executed. The decorative illumination that surrounds the figures is usually composed of curvilinear, swirling shapes within sharp geometric borders, and often takes inspiration from nature. Donha McGavin says that the Book of Kells panels are densely packed with intricate compositions of birds and serpentine quadrupeds. Janetta Rebold Benton also notes the use of the natural world in these ornamentations, and comments on the use of, or lack of, perspective in the ways the figures and ornaments are illustrated, saying, "The depiction of St. John demonstrates that the finest craftsmanship may be combined with a disinterest in realism, as seen in John's exceptionally odd anatomy. John is distilled to a two-dimensional decorative design, flat and frontal. Surrounding John, a symmetric geometric pattern is filled with curvilinear shapes, comprised of animal interlace, birds and animals so elongated and intertwined that they are hardly distinguishable from ribbons. The folio is entirely covered with dense, animated, and vigorous ornament, the effect enriched by the swirling and curling patterns. Execution of the drawing is precise. The circles are created with a compass." All these visual elements can be found in the animation style used in The Secret of Kells. The sharp, geometric forms of the abbey are contrasted with the flowing, curved shapes of some of the monks and of the forest beyond the walls. These separate visual styles represent tensions throughout the story: good and evil, religious and secular, safety within the abbey and the chaos of nature, and, of course, darkness and light. But in the end they come together into a cohesive combination that can be found in the illumination style of the Book of Kells, much as these tensions are resolved at the end of the film. The flat, non-realistic style of perspective is also borrowed from the book, which is especially evident in the figures and in zoomed-out scenes where distances are compressed or changed. In some scenes, the characters Brandon and Aisling actually enter into the pages of the manuscript. Although I couldn't find any examples of this in the Book of Kells, Benton notes in her book that other medieval illuminated manuscripts often included marginalia of scribes working on manuscripts, so placing the characters of the film within the manuscript is another reference to the medium. So far, we've seen that both Amélie and The Secret of Kells remediate earlier works of art in both visual and narrative ways, creating a collaborative relationship with these works and opening a dialogue between old and new media, as well as artistic practices. In addition to these, however, there is a cultural aspect of these films' acts of remediation. Charlie Michael quotes the critic Jérôme Larcher as saying of Amélie that it's actually difficult to imagine a film more French than this one. This is due in large part to Genet's incorporation of what Michael terms, quote, a cluster of national cinematic and artistic influences, unquote, into the film. By opening a dialogue between 21st century French cinema and French art history, especially to the French painting tradition, Amélie accomplishes two things. First, it connects modern artistic practices and culture to that of the past, creating a cohesive link between France's artistic tradition and its present-day arts and culture. This is why, as Larcher says, the film feels very French. It is infused with cultural and artistic references to the country's past and to its national persona, recognizable to French and worldwide audiences alike. Because the film looks to the past, and because its painterly style lends a charming, fantastical feel to its world, it has an air of nostalgia that is also characteristically French, due to its commitment to tradition and national and historical pride. The second effect of Amédie's incorporation of French art history is to place this film, and the medium more broadly, within the art historical canon. T.S. Eliot, in his 1919 essay Tradition and the Individual Talent, sets forth the idea that every artist is in conversation with every other artist, stating that, quote, "No poet, no artist of any art has his complete meaning alone," unquote. Eliot is stressing the importance of capital T tradition in art, but is also underscoring that every work of art, in relating to what has come before, is also relating to what will come later. Each work becomes part of the canon. By engaging in this referential dialogue with art history, Amélie is staking its claim as part of the canon, challenging the established hierarchy of media that classes painting as high art and popular mass media, like film, as lowbrow. The Secret of Kells is challenging these hierarchies in a related but different way. As Maria O'Brien and Marwa Al-Khayyat have both noted, there is a parallel between Irish identity and the choice to tell the story through animation. O'Brien writes that Ireland, on the margins of Europe, and animation, considered often as on the margins of the film industry, come together in The Secret of Kells to interrogate ideas of the nation and Irishness within a world context. In particular, The Secret of Kells uses 2D, hand-drawn animation on paper, not CGI or even digitally assisted 2D animation, which even in 2009 was distinctly against the industry grain. There is a large independent animation industry in Europe which uses predominantly 2D animation, but Ireland, though it has a flourishing animation scene, is only marginally European. The Secret of Kells, in using hand-drawn techniques, is participating in an ancient Irish tradition of craft, a tradition which has been revived against great odds through the Irish arts and crafts movement at the turn of the century and the more widespread Celtic revival. By using the physical tools of paper and ink, Moore and Toomey are engaging with the legacy of the Book of Kells, not just in content, but in materials as well, transposing the book's physicality into the modern medium of film. By remediating an Irish artifact with a somewhat archaic technique to create a decidedly Irish film, Moore and Toomey are standing up to European and American forces of culture, art, and technology to establish their own artistic vision. Like Amélie, The Secret of Kells incorporates a broad range of cultural and artistic influences and references beyond the Book of Kells, including traditional music, Old Irish poetry, and folklore, among many others. Furthermore, through the film's exploration and narrativization of history, it is engaging in an ancient Irish practice, storytelling. O'Brien explains that fundamental to the construction of the nation of Ireland as a concept is the telling of its stories that both represent the nation to its own people and others, and are instrumental in constructing the image of the nation. Moore himself has expressed his desire to participate in the storytelling tradition, stating that he believes that there is a strong underpinning in folklore that connects us to the past generations who retold these stories orally, and that the old stories contain links to our culture, to the past, and to universal truths. By including all these aspects of Irish culture and tradition, the film embraces the nation's heritage and its cultural and artistic contributions and presents them in a beautiful, poignant way. For global audiences, The Secret of Kells conveys a huge amount of Irish artistic tradition and a positive, multifaceted view of what it means to be Irish. For the Irish viewer, the film is full of hidden references and is a genuinely joyful celebration of Irishness. Like Amélie with its metro scenes and accordion soundtrack, The Secret of Kells works with the Book of Kells and every story, poem, song, and artwork referenced in the film to create a dynamic artistic collaboration that spans centuries and expands outward globally and into the future, as Eliot encourages. We've seen two examples of films that remediate older media, in this case an impressionist painting and a medieval illuminated manuscript, and adapt them in some way for the screen and for a modern audience. Through these acts of remediation and adaptation, these films engage in a dialogue with the past, attaching the newer, more lowbrow medium of film to the canon of art history, while also making older works of art relevant to today's viewer. This collaborative, dynamic relationship also allows filmmakers to engage with the artistic and cultural history of their nation or community, sustaining and contributing to telling the story of their land and people, and making this story available to a global audience.